Nowadays, the best way to make a lot of money is to make the same thing over and over again. And since companies love money, they would try their best to stretch things out to the fullest. And as a franchise keeps going, there's always a need to one-up what came before. This would naturally get tougher as the franchise keeps going. Take any long-running anime and put the first episode next to the latest, and anyone not informed will definitely say, "How did we get here?" When something reaches this point, it in my eyes has entered the realm of absurdity. However, there is one game franchise that takes all this and goes even further beyond. One that stretches the limits of absurdity to unprecedented levels, and somehow is not an absolute train wreck. And that franchise is none other than Devil May Cry has experienced a rich and influential history in gaming, and as the games have evolved their gameplay, their campiness has as well. In fact, I'd argue there's a huge correlation between the absurdity of the narrative and the depth of the gameplay. But many will argue that Devil May Cry was always absurd, even the first game has its cheesy moments. But even so, how do we get from a campy gothic horror action game into this? In this video, I'll show you not only why DMC's tone changed into being more lighthearted fun, but how this impacted the gameplay and the legacy of the franchise. So sit back as I take you through Devil May Cry's descent into absurdity. I think almost every Devil May Cry game's intro has a section that's just camp perfection. A scene that perfectly sets the player up that this isn't just any game, no. This is Devil May Cry. DMC 5 has a flipping truck sequence, DMC 4 has Nero drop kicking Dante in the face, DMC 3 is just magnificent with Dante walking off sights in his abdomen then using a demon as a skateboard while shooting other demons. DMC 2 we'll talk about later, and this all applies to the first ever game, Devil May Cry. This game features Trish riding a motorcycle into Dante's shop, then stabbing Dante with his own sword, and then throwing her motorcycle at Dante only for Dante to pull out his pistols and shoot the motorcycle back into Trish. And it all ends with Trish saying,
"Seems that way, but I'm not your enemy."
What the fuck?
The scene is wonderful as it sets up Dante's cocky personality. It's also just classic Devil May Cry campiness. And the first half of the game follows suit, embracing Dante's bravado as he taunts and mocks the early game bosses.
Block off, Featherface, or you can stick around and find out the hard way.
However, this personality is a stark contrast to the darker and almost horror-like atmosphere of Malay Island. So what was Devil May Cry supposed to be? Well, for those who don't know, the developers of Devil May Cry, led by Hideki Kamiya, were initially tasked with making Resident Evil 4. Yes, the Resident Evil 4. Now you may be asking, how did we get from survival horror game to sword-wielding, demon-slaying badass? Well, that's also what Capcom said, but instead of scrapping the idea, they decided to put a fresh coat of paint on it and make it its own IP. And boy did they make the right choice, because Devil May Cry will go on to be a huge hit and revolutionize the action game genre. But Devil May Cry's roots in RE4 explain the campiness of the game, as I'm sure many of you are aware of what kind of game the original RE4 is.
No way, Leon.
Way?
But comparing the two, somehow the horror game has more wacky moments than Devil May Cry. Because the second half of the game switches up and tries to be serious, but if you know what happens, it's just really dumb. Doesn't help that the voice acting gave us bangers like,
"I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
So even when the game was trying to be emotional, it ended up just being campy. But what about the gameplay? Does it reflect the story's tone? Well, in later titles we will see the insanity in full display, but the first one is fairly simple. You have a style meter, but it's not as dopamine fueling as the other games. Dante's toolset is decent, and most of the melee weapons have extremely similar movesets except for Ifrit. Gun selection is much more diverse, but it gets annoying having to open the menu every time you want to switch weapons. So the combat is simple yet fun, which kind of encapsulates the first Devil May Cry as a whole. So how do we get from these humble beginnings to the wild, wacky, and of course absurdity of modern Devil May Cry games? Well, long story short, Devil May Cry 2 sucks fucking ass. Look, I'll keep this section as brief as I possibly can because 1, holy shit, this game is dog water, and 2, everyone's already talked about how bad the gameplay is in this game. And you know what? I think you guys can just observe the riveting gameplay on display and come to your own conclusion. But besides, that's not important in this video. What is, however, is does Devil May Cry 2 at least have the fun moments we all know and love from this franchise? No, it's very boring. Now, I will admit, I did not actually play through the entire game. I only played up to halfway through mission 4 before my game crashed. I swear to God, I'm not making this stuff up. It had already crashed once trying to boot up the game, and I couldn't stomach playing anymore, so I just looked online for what I needed to know. The first thing I already had an idea of, and just needed more confirmation of, was of the main man himself, Dante. Which there was not a lot of, and that's part of the problem. Remember how I was talking about how every DMC intro had their wacky moment? Well, DMC 2 starts with this narrator trying to make Dante sound super cool, but it's just kind of weird. And Dante himself is completely different. Instead of the cocky and bash Dante we love, he barely even talks. They try to go with the cool and collected hero. And yeah, Dante was cool in the other games, but they had fun with it. Instead, this Dante is just a ripoff of Master Chief, except remove any of the fun. I don't know why this game takes itself so seriously, but it just doesn't work. But moving on from the disaster, there needed to be change if the franchise were to keep going, and Capcom opted for a drastic change in the form of Devil May Cry 3. Every part of the previous games were increased in this one by 110%, and for this video in particular, the absurdity was practically tripled. And it all starts once again with Dante. DMC 3 is a prequel, so Dante in this game is a teenager. This was going to be used to explain his wacky antics, but after this game, he realized they were just too good not to keep around. Dante's cockiness has increased tenfold in this game, and he's also just very entertaining to watch. His banter with the bosses had so much more energy in this game. But Dante's carefree attitude is actually part of his character arc, as he starts out very arrogant and selfish, but grows out of it in an albeit simple but heartfelt plot. Virgil returns not being possessed, instead he's a katana-wielding badass that acts as a great foil to Dante's character. While Dante is extreme in his funny antics, Virgil is just as extreme, except it's in being edgy. He's basically like those super edgy anime side characters with a really tragic backstory like, when I was 16, I got a parking ticket, and now, I'm out for revenge. Except increase the edginess by like 1,000. They even had a mocap studio do the action scenes, which makes for some of the smoothest action scenes in any game ever. And finally, this game has the bravery to do whatever the fuck it wants, and I love it for that. Like the one boss is a really horny demon woman, but after you defeat her, she helps Dante by turning into a guitar that's also a scythe and can also shoot bats. No, there was not a single word in that sentence that was false. And that's what I love about Devil May Cry, the ability to just have the most insane things just happen and everyone just goes along with it. Although this game probably has the best story, Devil May Cry's story is never a focus of these games, as the cutscenes are more focused on delivering wild moments rather than deep plot moments. What I also love about the franchise is the stylish gameplay, which DMC 3 has a lot of. One of the ways it achieves this is with, well, combat styles. There are 4 at the start, but 2 more that you get later. Each style specializes in a specific area of combat, so players will always find a style that fits them. I already mentioned the guitar scythe bat thing, but the other weapons are just as unique, and it's the same with the guns. This game gives you so many tools to be badass with, but one thing I want to point out is that this tonal shift between the games not only affects the story, but also the gameplay. While the other games are mostly about efficiency, this game wants you to utterly humiliate your opponents in the most stylish ways. And I think the bombastic cutscenes subconsciously push the player into doing just that. Because I think players have a natural tendency to reflect who they're playing as in their gameplay. Take someone like Master Chief for example. The game presents him as an efficient war machine, so you will naturally play the Halo campaign as this expert combatant dispatching Covenant forces with efficiency. This is another reason why DMC 2, you just hold the square button for every encounter because that's what you feel that Dante would do, and also besides the fact that it's just ridiculously easy. DMC 3 Dante is far from effective, instead he kills demons in the most stylish ways possible. And this is also what the game wants you to do during gameplay. It wants you to experiment and find out what works, but more importantly, what's cool. This is also why they have a big show whenever you get a new weapon, because it's nudging you to try it out and see how it fits with all the other weapons. Because you're not going to be Dante simply by booting up the game, and the cutscenes only show you who you can be. You have to work and experiment with all the weapons, learn the game's enemies and mechanics, and then and only then will you just be like the Dante shown in the cutscenes. Which I'm not. I suck at these games. What's more important is that by having the cutscenes and the characters be absurd and wacky, it allows the gameplay to be just as creative and more importantly, fun without it ruining the tone of the game. Because if you set no rules or limitations as to what is possible or believable, then technically anything is possible. And this new version of Devil May Cry will be expanded upon in DMC 4, but truly perfected in DMC 5. Although we did have a little hiccup along the way. In my opinion, I think DMC 5 strikes the perfect balance between the ridiculous, wacky moments without it feeling too obnoxious. For how much I love DMC 3 for being balls to the wall non-stop insanity, I feel a lot of people would just find it too much. DMC 5 is a bit more refined. Its jokes have a bit more taste than... Never mind. Who am I kidding? This shit is ridiculous. But what makes this game and DMC 4 a little different is that Dante isn't the only one invited to this party. Nero returns from DMC 4 and he is young and brash, but still cracks his fair share of jokes. DMC 5 was actually my first DMC ever, and I feel that Nero was a great way to introduce players into what DMC is, not just tonally, but gameplay wise as well. He is the simplest out of all the characters, but simple in DMC means he still probably has double the depth than most other games. Nero offers huge amounts of variety in the forms of his Devil's Breakers, which also have some pretty crazy variants. V's entire personality is just one big joke. He's a super edgy version of Adam Driver who spouts poetry as he slays demons. His gameplay is actually pretty unique, as he gets to control demons that were all once bosses from DMC 1. But it is a bit easy in my opinion. But easy is far from what I would call the main man himself, Dante. They did a great job of maturing Dante from his teenage years in DMC 3. He still is the wacky Dante we all love, but he now feels like that really fun uncle instead of a rambunctious teenager, which if you know the story, makes a surprising amount of sense. But if you thought he was decked out in DMC 3, then you were not ready for him in DMC 5. Because in this game, he has 4 styles, 3 swords, 5 guns, ice and shotguns that can turn into his 5 staff, dual pistols, a shotgun, 2 rock launchers, a hat, and a motorcycle that can split into 2, all of which can be changed on the fly. So yeah, simple. Virgil also makes a return in this game, not only as a playable character in the DLC, but as the antagonist. And yeah, while he isn't as built up as he is in DMC 3, he's just so cool in this game. In fact, everything about this game screams cool, from the creative weapons to the quirky characters, and even the excellent soundtrack, which I don't think I even need to tell you how fucking awesome Bird's Eye is because holy shit, this song fucking slaps!
If you want it, then you'll have to take it. But you already knew that.
It's no secret that Devil May Cry has revolutionized the action game genre, but I think that's also its characters and style that have also impacted people. Just search with the words Virgil status on YouTube and... So what makes Devil May Cry so appealing? Well, I don't know about everyone else, but for me, Devil May Cry instills a sort of childlike joy. The joy of seeing badass guys kill a bunch of demons in insane and wacky ways, or seeing 2 of them duke it out. It's absurd, but it's the kind of absurd only a child's imagination could come up with. Devil May Cry feels like you just skipped the end of an anime where everyone has already gone through a training arc. So now all you're left with is cool guys with awesome powers. For how deep the gameplay can be, Devil May Cry also relaxes the player's expectations and allows them to just revel in the pure chaos on display. There was a time where I was super judgmental about media, always analyzing it to determine its quality. I still do look deeper into things, it's kind of what my channel is all about, but some things like Devil May Cry make me realize to just relax and have fun. And I think the developers learned the same lesson after the disaster that was Devil May Cry 2, because each subsequent game felt like they were a passion project made with a lot of love and fun put into it. Because why bother being so deep when you could be so stylish? Hey y'all, thanks for watching. This video was quite a wild one and I had to essentially rewrite the entire thing, but I'm hoping it turns out okay. The original script was a complete clusterfuck, so if I ever do release it, I kinda wanna go over it with a live audience so we can all just laugh at it together, but that's for the future. But if you like this video, please subscribe, and I'll catch you another time.